Alrighty, and hello everybody. Welcome to the Good and Kinky Show. My name is Greg, and with me I have Blank Tester
Or Bob. I'm
or,
fine
or
with either.
Bob. Okay, and we're going to be talking about a subject that came to my mind: the idea of is God ever an acceptable answer to a question or to a mystery? That if there's something you don't know, is God ever really an answer? Or is it a negation of a stop thinking or a stop of your thoughts regarding the answer to the question? My contention is that it is an automatic stop.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think full disclosure for those who don't know me, which is probably everybody, we pretty much agree on the question of God. I'm an atheist as well.
Mm-hmm.
My perspective. Well, I want you to give. I think it would be better if you gave your perspective first,
Okay.
what you were telling me before, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking.
Well, where this came about, I was talking to a friend where he had said about there needs to be a higher power, and I had said, why? Basically, why does there need to be? If there's no evidence, if there's nothing in life that we can look at like we would look at a mystery of a murder or missing money or anything, a car accident, if there's nothing in the details of the event that we are investigating that would lead us to the conclusion of a god or something higher than us, then why should we think that there is such a thing? The
Right.
idea that we don't know the answer to the question, so that means it has to be this. If you do that, my contention is the minute you try and insert that filler, be it we don't know so God, or we don't know so aliens, or we don't know so the boogeyman, the minute you do that, you're stopping any desire to try and actually get at what the real answer is.
Mhm.
And he had even gone to the aspect of, well, on the quantum level, that yes, there's a
Oh,
lot of things
jeez.
we do not understand on the quantum level. And the laws of physics seem to completely change on the quantum level. I don't argue that. I don't understand it. But does that mean that we insert a magical being? Because in that, I go back to what Neil deGrasse Tyson had said of if this is how you want to invoke God, then just be aware that God is an ever receding pocket of scientific ignorance.
Right.
And that was, I think, the best answer ever given for that issue.
Right. And uh you know, that kind of connects a little bit to what I was thinking when you asked me the question was, um, it's not so much a question of is well, your question is valid. Your question makes sense, but I think it's more informative to ask uh, what we're talking about when we suggest the idea of a god, and then see if that can lead us in the direction of the answer to your question. And by that I mean, like, if we predefine God in certain ways, then it's really easy to just knock some of those conceptions of God out. Like, we can just say,
Mm-hmm.
like, uh God is a being. If we just define God, and I'm not saying any religions
Right.
do this, but if we just define God in a very particular way, like, God is a being that prevents any gas from surrounding any rocky body in the solar system. If we do that, then obviously that God doesn't exist,
Right.
right? We can disprove that God. But if we want to go with, like, the Judeo-Christian God, or like one of the Hindu gods, or anything like that, then you've started to define that God before we've even gotten to any of the data that God might be an answer to.
Right.
And the only way I can see God being an okay answer, even conceptually, an okay answer to a question of of any question would be if we start with the question and then shape the God around that question. So like if we and again it becomes a God of the gaps in most cases. I don't know. I can't think of an immediate question. That doesn't mean that question couldn't exist. It could be it would have to be something where we've exhausted every other possibility and then said, okay, well, then we'll just take this whatever mystery and just label it God. I don't know what kind of question it would be, but that's basically the process of science at that point. Because like if we look at if things fall down, right? When I drop something, it falls. Newton said, okay, that force, that thing, that falling down property of things, we'll call it gravity. And he gave it a name, and then he just did some math and found some properties about it. Is it possible to do the same thing with God of some kind? I mean, that's at that point you're talking about like panentheism, where people say that the universe is pantheism or panentheism?
Oh, pantheism is the belief in multiple gods. Okay. And pantheism, well, that's polytheism.
Right. I think pantheism is believing. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The point is, you're basically headed in that direction. The idea that the world itself is God.
Right. But, that I think is what the pantheism is. That the world is.
And that could, I guess, if you want to define your God that way, like that's fine. But I think, like for instance, I'm the son of two Hindus, but my two Hindu parents both believe vastly different things. My dad is a theist in the sense that you imagine. He believes in a central God whose aspects could be considered other gods, but really it's just one God who has thoughts and ideas and beliefs and things like that. This God is, by some Hindu reckoning, has X, Y, and Z qualities. My mom, on the other hand, tends to be more of a pantheist, and my mom is effectively an atheist when it comes down to do you believe in a powerful person who can do? At that point, she's already not a believer in that. So she's not a traditional Western theist.
Well, in my experience,
my problem with her definition is that at that point, I don't know what the purpose of labeling God is.
Right.
It's either confusing because she says I believe in God, some Christian person says they believe in God, and they're talking about different things. What was the point of that conversation? The word God is being used in a whole bunch of different ways, or it's just it's a pointless thing to say because she's labeling the universe as something, but that doesn't aid us in understanding it, and it doesn't help us. Like the word universe already works.
Right.
If we're just describing everything.
Right.
Unless you're adding something with the definition.
Why do we have to put another
We don't need another name for it.
Yeah. But one of the things...
Would be my take. Is there a question for which God could be an appropriate answer? Yes, kind of. Only if you define God around the question.
Right. One of the things you'll see when you watch the video is, and those that are watching this live will see it, is there's an equation that I have up that I had found that I don't know if it just, I'm not this good in math type of thing, but the aspect of could it be a God equation or showing that there isn't, I don't know. And then there is another one that I'll leave this one because that one's been up for a little bit, and those that are good in this type of math can have fun with these. But the thing is, the idea of a God from, like you had said, your parents are Hindu.
Mm-hmm.
Hinduism and Buddhism are basically cousins.
Yeah.
And I have talked to a number of Buddhists, And more or less, we're on the same page as far as atheism and Buddhism are very, very close.
Right, and there's going to be some individual variation there.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, like, Western religions and, well, Islam is kind of a Western religion. But, like, a lot of the Western religions have very strict senses of, like, you have to believe X, Y, and Z. And a lot of the Eastern religions don't have, like, a list of required beliefs, you know?
Right.
And so they, you know, like, a Hindu sees another Hindu and they just go, you believe some things, I believe some other things, whatever.
And in that way, I think it's very similar to like how Jews interact with people, and
it's because the religions are so old, you know? Like, Judaism is a really old religion. So all the really crazy stuff has kind of worked its way out of the most of the people. Sorry about my phone.
That's right. But
you know, the same way with Hinduism or Buddhism or Shintoism.
And like the interviews that I've done with Mark Powers, those were very interesting. And if this sounds good type of thing, I'll know after I watch the video and hear how the audio sounds. But that'll tell me if this sounds good, that I can do an interview with Mark Powers like this.
Yeah,
and be able to cover different topics as well. But one of the things I had asked him early in the number of interviews that I did with him, of basically what reason would there be for me to be it's basically Jewish, and he had said none. He was initially one of, why would you want, you're not bound by the 613 laws, why would you want to put yourself in a position where you are? What reason do you have to do that? And I was like, that's a valid point. And from his point of view, from his perspective, from that God type of thing, it doesn't matter if I believe or not. And that is where I think Christianity and Islam haven't really split from Judaism in the most fundamental way. They're more a split from Zoroastrianism, the Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. That there is this big dynamic between the good and the evil. And that is where this whole notion of God versus Satan or God versus Iblis, it's just another variation of Ahura Mazda versus Ahriman. And people mistakenly try to attribute Christianity to Egypt, and it has very little.
Yeah.
There's some that you can say the aspect of sun worship and being sun gods, because I think back at that time with Egypt, they would have been very different in the aspect of being a sun religion, because Judaism is a moon.
Right.
So their aspect of going based on the sun would definitely at that time have been very different. But they had multiple deities. And one of the things I notice with religion and the aspect of the God notion is how one-dimensional the God is. That especially the idea that God is all good. Because none of us are all good or all evil. We're a mixture. Basically like the yin and yang, that the perfect person, if there would be such, would be the yin and yang symbol. That it would be a perfect mixture of white and a perfect mixture of black.
Well, I would actually say, I don't know, I think the whole thing strikes me as extremely arbitrary. You know, like the idea of somebody, like it being all good or all evil. Like, I feel like all our terms here are really ill-defined.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're ill-defined, it's not so much a yin and yang thing, so much as it's like, we want to see it as black and white, and it's not even all gray. It's that we don't even know what shades of gray they are.
Right.
And if there is an answer, like I can't even tell if the answer is going to be lighter on the lighter end of the grayscale or the darker end. There's no way for me to know.
Right.
Real quick before
Yes.
you continue, I just wanted to say that Laz Valdez in the chat said, personally, I call it creator, and I think it's a little bit arrogant for anyone to define it. We just don't know for sure. And I would say, like, that's kind of my point.
Right.
If you say, if we just define whatever, here's all the facts we have, and we'll just say whatever started that is the creator, God, whatever you want to call it. I mean, does that help us get anywhere? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, it doesn't help me. Certainly,
Right.
It's not a helpful answer for me. It doesn't provide me any kind of personal anything. But more importantly, it doesn't drive me towards any other answers. So it's an irrelevant answer. And then the other thing is, 2-liter JRC said, he said, "Hello, Greg.
Hi.
I can't respect the atheist. To this view, all of your instances are irrelevant and just blindly incorrect. Greg's videos be complete shit." Which is beautifully worded. Just
Oh yeah.
ooh, yeah, that's
But
toast.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and Free Spirit at Last also said that's your opinion. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he was talking to JRC or if he was talking to us or whatever.
But by all means, I'm glad you're checking out what is in the comment, what people are saying, because I closed that so there wouldn't be any feedback with the aspect of the audio.
Yeah.
But yeah, by all means, feel free to interject the things that are in the comment section. But I disagree with the aspect of we can't, or it's arrogant to define what a God would be, because there's no way for us to really have a discussion about the subject unless we define what the hell we mean.
Right.
That we have to give a definition to what something is, even if, yes, the definition we give may be inaccurate in the broad scheme of what it could be if such would exist.
Right.
But by the same token, if primates would give their representation or their ideas of what we are, they would not be totally encompassing what we are, but their perception of us. And I think that is where these ideas of what a God could be are more a reflection of where we're coming from and where our head is, rather than where this thing would be.
Right. And I think also if we try to define the God, and if it's being claimed that we're being arrogant by trying to define creator, God, again, whatever word you choose, then I'm sorry to say that, like, I don't really care about being arrogant.
Right.
Just because, like, it's if I'm not allowed to define my terms, if I'm not allowed to at least understand the definitions being used, like, I don't have to come up with the definitions. If someone else wants to tell me what definitions words mean in a discussion, that's fine. But I'm not willing to have a conversation if we're not even allowed to discuss, to determine what the definitions are. Because at that point, I'm not even in a discussion. I'm just in, like, we're just talking past each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you define bananas as one thing different than I am, I define them, and I say bananas are delicious, and you say, how could you do that? Like,
Right.
what are we even like? If we can't define our terms, we can't have a conversation.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing with, like, maybe you define your creator and you say, well, here's what I think it is, and we say, oh, but this contradicts that. You can change your mind. You can even say, like, I don't believe in that. I believe in something else. It's like, fine, whatever, that happens.
But
I don't really mind that. And I'm not going to pin you down on, like, oh, but you said God was this, and
right.
You can't say you're a believer in God. Therefore, you're an atheist. Like, it's not about word games. It's just about trying to figure out what we're talking about. Because if there's some unmentioned part of your definition that isn't in the strict definition, then I'm not going to know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I might even agree with you if you define your God carefully enough.
Mm-hmm. And there's also the aspect that you didn't mention it, but it's kind of an underlining in what was being said. The aspect of, if they change their position at all, it is as if they're waffling, or even worse, like they're like science, and oh my word, you changed how you're thinking? How dare you? That must mean you're flawed. Because that is the mindset that the religious seem to have regarding science. They want to be acting like, well, science is constantly changing.
Some religious people. There are plenty of religious people who aren't anti-science.
Right, but
they just But like the scientifically illiterate, it would seem.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm sure you've run into it as well. The aspect of any change in science, they look at it as, see, it's not perfect.
Right.
They completely ignore the fact that science is based on what does the evidence show us. And if the evidence shows us something different and takes us in a different direction, then yes, scientists and science will change their direction and their thought to fit the evidence. And that's where I think what a lot of people, not just the religious, but people in general, try to do.
Yeah, it's not even just the religious. It's like there are plenty of people who think science is about acquiring knowledge. Mm-hmm. Science isn't about knowledge. Science has no claim to knowledge. What science is about is creating working models, which is why we can have multiple working models for how a thing works.
And our understanding.
Yeah, and it's all about, it's just about trying to see if we can come up with models that predict a future things. So when you look at quantum mechanics, for instance,
right,
we don't have a theory of everything. We don't know how exactly quantum mechanics works, but we have models that suggest that, for instance, like a positron and an electron. A positron is just an electron going backwards in time. That's an idea. And it works with the math, but it's not the only way to look at things.
Right.
And the reason there are there are some ideas in science that seem incontrovertible and others that don't is because there's so much evidence that only one idea is left standing after a long period of people coming up with ideas. Now, if you come up with a new idea, like if somebody came up with a new idea that explains all the facts and replaces gravity, we'd be back to having two working models.
Right.
That's it. That's all there is to it. It's not about, oh, well, gravity's completely wrong, or this thing is completely wrong, or gravity's completely right, this thing's completely right. Gravity is not set in stone.
Right.
In fact, we know at a certain point Newtonian physics doesn't work. That's why we have physics on different scales. That's why we have, that's just the nature of science. Science isn't about finding the exact answer. It's just about finding working models. And also, can I just say, this is the third time I'm seeing in the chat that 2-liter JRC says, Greg remembers me, but I'm not reading his comments because that's all he wants me to do.
Okay, I don't.
Yeah, I figured.
I don't recall.
That's a pretty unremarkable name.
Yeah. I don't. The only TJ I know of is The Amazing Atheist.
No, 2-liter.
2-liter?
2-liter JRC.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not ringing any bells. But one of the things I've noticed with people in general is, and it's a big, it might be a logical fallacy, it's definitely a flaw in thinking, is leading the evidence. Trying to, and this is where presuppositionalism comes in, is the idea of you have your presupposed idea and you're going to try and use that to lead the evidence or to influence the direction the evidence is supposed to go. It doesn't work that way. That, I think, is in some way that is a logical fallacy, because you're not going by what the evidence shows. You're wanting to insert your ideas, and leading the evidence never gets you to the right answer.
Right. And it's like, it's oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the fallacy. It's kind of related to the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where someone says, they see what happened already and then insert their explanation as a, like, a house burns down, and then you say, "Oh, well, God wanted that to happen."
Yeah.
The data is where it landed, and then you're drawing your sharpshoot, your target symbol around where the bullets landed to say, "Oh, look what a great shot God is."
Right. It's similar to the what I had heard a Jew had mentioned of, you have an archer in a field that has all these arrows in bullseye, and being, that's amazing. How did you do that? He's like, it's simple. First, I shoot the arrow.
Where the arrow landed.
First, I shoot the arrow, and then I go and draw the circle around it. That's what Christianity does with Judaism, and they try to, the aspect of, they have what they want, and they want to try and draw the circle around, and it doesn't work. It's it can look good, but it's intellectually
bankrupt.
Yeah. But the whole notion, and this is where my personal feeling of, if the ideas of a God, all of them lead us to a position of nothing in life points us in that direction, why then should anyone be concerned with if such exists? Because even if one would, the lack of any evidence in that direction in life, to me, there's only two possible conclusions. One, it doesn't exist to create evidence, or it doesn't give a fuck.
Right.
And if it doesn't give a fuck, why should we? And that is where I think people get hung up. And there's also what if, the what if aspect of, what if, like, Christianity and Islam are here as a test of us, not in the aspect of will you believe these things, but in the aspect of will you go along with them, being that if you do, then basically that you're going to be separated, not tortured. I don't agree with torture at all, and I would have problems with anything that would engage in that. But rather that it would be one of, you're going to be separated and basically scolded for how dare you have this sick mindset that you would.
I think it's worth making sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves, because you may or may not be a fan of torture. I'm not a fan of torture of any kind. Right. But it doesn't matter whether we're fans, because we're just asking what if.
Right.
It's just as likely an explanation as any other explanation, given no evidence. And it's not about personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind.
I don't want anybody thinking that you're suggesting that this is the way the world works.
Oh, no.
You're right. It's just a what if.
Yes.
And actually, I do want to bring something up. A friend of mine, I won't say his name for obvious reasons, a friend of mine who, from what I can tell, for all intents and purposes, he's he is an atheist. He has been for years now. He recently came to me and told me that he is thinking about becoming a Christian again. And I was like, okay, was it that you've changed your mind, or is it that you never were an atheist and you were just either? I mean, I don't care if he was
Right.
lying to me. That doesn't matter to me, But like, if he was lying to himself,
Mm-hmm.
he should be sure he's doing what's right for him.
Right.
He's my friend. That's what I'm concerned about. And I don't care whether he agrees with me. We don't have to agree on everything. We don't agree on a lot of things.
Right.
But I asked him, is it because you've changed your mind since you, at some time in the last year or so, or whenever, you've changed your mind from an atheist to a theist, or is it that you never were an atheist? And he said something that I thought was very odd. Basically, he suggests, in a roundabout way, he suggested that it's not that he changed his mind. He still doesn't believe that he doesn't think there's any evidence that there's a God. But he gets emotional, something, it rewards him and soothes him to be able to do things like pray or go to church. It's not the community part of it. It's the, verbally in his room praying with his hands clasped together.
Mental masturbation.
Yeah. And, it helps him. It soothes him. It helps him better than, otherwise he feels very anxious, yada, yada.
Well.
And I'm sympathetic.
Yeah.
To the idea of wanting to feel if you've got anxiety. For me, what I do is I have a psychiatrist that helps me deal with my depression and my anxiety, not caused by existential dread. I have a chemical imbalance, and I treat that with therapy and medication, and it works for me.
Okay.
And I'm fine. I'm not a risk to anyone. I'm not a risk to myself. I'm fine. And if that doesn't work for him, that doesn't work for him.
Now, the chemical imbalance that you mentioned...
If speaking aloud to someone he doesn't really think exists works for him, I guess fine. That doesn't seem like something that would work for me, but if it works for him, it's no skin off my back,
Right.
But I don't think, even in that scenario, it answers... There's a question that you can answer with God, other than what thing don't you believe in?
Yeah. Right.
It's still not an answer. It doesn't seem like he believes in God. He's just going through the motions in the same way that masturbation is going through the motions,
right.
The physical stimulation of having sex without actually having sex.
That's where I think what you described, and I would have, and I'm an anti-theist as well as an atheist.
Right.
And what goes through my mind and what ran through my mind when you were telling that was mental masturbation. If he wants to mentally, I don't care.
Right.
I don't want to watch, but
right, yeah, it's
have fun.
If he asks me to join him, I'm going to say no.
Right.
But he's welcome to do whatever he wants. It doesn't matter to me.
What you do in the privacy of your home or your room or when you're
even
by
if
yourself.
You do it in public, as long as you don't hurt anybody, I don't really care.
Well,
as long as you're not hurting anybody, you're not imposing your beliefs on anyone. Just being in your presence doesn't hurt me.
Right.
And that's just my personal thing. If it hurts someone else, then don't do that. It's not just about hurting me, it's about hurting anyone.
Right.
So if him praying aloud is bothering someone, he's at the library, don't do that.
Right.
That's annoying.
That's just a basic courtesy.
Yeah, that's just courtesy. That's all. I just care if everybody's courteous, fine. I don't care.
Right. But
by the way, just so you know, there's some really great conversation going on in the chat.
Oh, okay.
That's
One
great.
thing that did go through my mind with the one that had said about my videos suck and so forth,
Mm.
if they suck so much, why are they in the chat? Why are they watching my videos?
I think he said that you definitely remember him. He's insisted on that a couple times.
Okay.
And he said his previous account got blocked or banned or whatever. So this is his new account, but it doesn't. Whatever. He said, Greg, you wouldn't be judging all this when the all high and mighty God Yahweh judges you.
Actually, if I would be, and I would really, it's one of the things when it comes to the aspect of after I'm dead type of thing, I don't see my life going on. But
right.
if
I think this guy's probably a troll just because he said first he said Jesus is a place name, and now he's spelling false with a PH. I don't think anybody thinks false is spelled with a PH. So,
but
I think he's probably just a troll.
Yes, and I've blocked multiple trolls.
Got him. You got us, buddy.
But the aspect of after I'm dead, I don't see how I could have any type of conscious anything. Because consciousness is an aspect of the living brain.
As far as we know, yeah.
And the aspect of feeling. We feel things, like I can feel when I pinch my skin and so forth, and you can feel when you get your hand near fire because we have nerves under our skin. And they're sending signals to our brain. There is no evidence, there's no evidence of a spiritual anything.
Right.
But even if there would be, there's no reason to believe that it would have nerves or a brain or a way to register pain and pleasure in the way we do. It is a massive leap. What it is doing is people are showing that they are addicted to and obsessed with everything that is physical because it's all we understand. It's all we know. And so their heaven and hell is a reflection of or an extension of their physical obsession. That's why I think heaven and hell are described in physical terms, yet they'll toss around, it's spiritual. Well, what the hell was that? Mm-hmm. And I think in their own way, they don't even believe in this spiritual bullshit. Because everything they're defining and describing is in the physical pains and pleasures, but all of that is what is connected to life.
And see, I'm not sure I completely agree. I think there are some people who probably don't really believe. That's why people come out of the woodworks. That's why we have the priests who finally come clean and say, yes, I don't believe, that kind of thing. That happens. But I'm not so sure there's I think there are plenty of people who will believe things that we find utterly preposterous and still use terms that we don't understand, and terms that we find just completely absurd, like the idea that hell burns.
Yeah,
burning is a sensation that we feel, but they can always duck and dodge with things like, that's a metaphor, we're talking about this thing or that thing, or whatever. But for me, it always comes down to if you want to ask me to do something to prepare for an afterlife, you have to show me that an afterlife is coming or is likely to happen. In the same way that you don't see me preparing every time I leave the house to get attacked by wolves. I don't prepare that.
Oh, you don't?
And I know wolves exist.
Yeah.
I've seen them. I've never been attacked by one, but I know wolves do attack people on occasion. It has happened. It's not crazy. And when I leave the house, there is a non-zero possibility that I will be attacked by a wolf. But I don't prepare for that eventuality because I don't think there's a lot of evidence that it's going to happen. And the same way, if you want to get me to prepare for an afterlife by professing something or believing something, you have to show me that afterlife is likely to happen. It has to be more than 50% likely to happen. Not more than 0, more than 50.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be more than a coin toss for me to even, like, if I knew there was a 50% chance that wolves would attack me, even then I'd have to decide, do I really want to carry any kind of protection on me? Like, you know, you'd have to show me like 60% chance. Okay, maybe I should, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was like a 10% chance, I might just go to my car. Like, I don't care.
Or maybe have a thing of dog treats in your pocket just in case.
Yeah, like, I don't know, whether it's a gun or dog treats or whatever I think might help, you know. I don't prepare for eventualities that I know do happen to people. Why would I prepare for an eventuality that I don't think happens to people?
Well, what's also comical is I had done a video on hell and why it's impossible, and I found one website that the dumbass had actually tried saying that hell is in the center of the earth. And I pulled up live science on the temperature of the core, and they have found that it's 1,000 degrees hotter than they previously thought.
Right.
That the temperature, now the maximum temperature with brimstone is about, in Fahrenheit, 832 degrees.
That's it?
That's it. Because above 832 degrees Fahrenheit, sulfur, brimstone, turns into a gas. So if you have brimstone or sulfur in fire and brimstone, in order to have that, you have a max temperature of 832 degrees. Well, the liquid inside of our Earth, it's about roughly 10,832 degrees.
Right.
10,000 degrees hotter. But that's not the worst. The atmospheric pressure. 3.3 million atmospheres.
Yeah.
That had me laughing. The idea that anyone would be there, you'd be flatter than a fucking pancake.
And see, like when somebody makes a claim like, oh, there's going to be fire and brimstone, like, then when they just say that vaguely, we can't really get into an argument. We shouldn't get into arguments about, well, brimstone only gets so hot and fire blah blah blah. But when he makes a specific concrete claim about hell is in the center of Earth, that's a testable claim.
Yes.
And that's a claim that doesn't even line up with his own beliefs, let alone before we've even checked. You know,
right.
Like, we haven't even gone to check. Don't think we can.
No.
That would be pretty impressive, but I don't think we can do it.
We don't have any equipment that can withstand the pressure.
Withstand that kind of temperature or pressure. But, like,
I don't even know if it's the temperature, it's the pressure.
Well,
because I
think the deepest hole they ever dug was in Russia, and they didn't get very far relative to the size of the Earth, obviously.
Right.
But they had to stop because their drill bits were melting.
Mm-hmm.
Or softening. And, like, that makes sense. It's gonna be hot.
Yeah.
It's really, really hot. That's why oh gosh, what's it called? The kind of power where you use the geothermal. Geothermal power, there's like so much of it that's one renewable energy source we can use. We're not renewing it. We're not heating the planet back up.
Right.
It's considered renewable, but it's not really renewable. We're just using the power that's down there. And it's just not going to run out anytime soon.
Right. And the aspect of heating your house, holy shit. Yeah, nothing better than pretty much what's under our feet.
Yeah. If
we could tap into that, by all means, we would have heat forever. But, yeah, it's one, I think we should pretty much wrap it up soon because we're at almost 40 minutes. Yeah. But the whole notion is one I find laughably absurd when people use this threat of hell as if they think it's going to mean anything to me. Because, especially, and I also do the thank you for admitting that your hell is physical.
Right.
Basically, that you don't even believe in this spiritual bullshit.
Mm.
Because if you're everything that you're describing is in physical pains and pleasures, then you're not really buying into the whole spiritual woo-woo stuff. So we can pretty much let that kind of go by the wayside.
Right, we can just set that aside, because obviously that's not what you're talking about.
Right, and even if a God would exist, it can't be based on what we believe, because I have a hard time believing or even entertaining the idea that there would be some magical fucking thing behind the universe that would really give two fucking shits what thoughts an evolved primate has.
Right.
That would be like saying you or I give two fucking shits what ants are thinking.
Right. I mean, I kind of care. No, not gonna lie, I do kind of care a little bit.
Or that if you're looking at the ants and being, now you have to worship me. If you don't worship me, I'm going to put a magnifying glass over you.
Mm.
And that'll show I'm loving. No, it won't. Being a dick does not show that you're a figure of love.
Right, that doesn't constitute a nice thing to do.
No. And even if, like, in the aspect, to wrap it up, the aspect of a god, and if there would be, even if it would be saying, oh, I'm going to torture a Kim Jong-un, I would look at it and be, so you're telling me you're no different than Kim Jong-un. All right, I regard him as a dick, and I can now regard you as an equal dick.
Right.
Because both of you are engaging in the same type of behavior. If there is something that is a higher power, then it has to behave better than us. If my morals are superior to whatever you're calling a god, it can't be a higher power, because morally I'm superior. So regardless of whether or not there is something, if its behavior is worse than human behavior, you failed. I don't see how there can be any other conclusion. But I'll give you the final thoughts on that. Anything, Bob?
I think you about said it.
Alrighty.
I mean, yeah, like, I have nothing to add.
All right. Well, you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. And I see the haters are there as well, so have a good one.
They always will be.
Yep.